Well, I don't know about you, but yeah, I like going to the grocery store, but I'm kind of feeling the pinch just like all of us right now, that the inflation that's the story right now, food inflation. There was a recent update, Statistics Canada marks and tracks this, and they're talking about the slowing of inflation. I want to be careful about saying it that way. It's decelerating faster than expected, says this story at saltwire.com, down to 5.2% year over year. We had food inflation in the double digit area, and food and energy costs are still driving that bus, if you will. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this from a voice that I've not yet had the privilege of speaking with in this platform. My name is Sheldon McLeod. This is Thinking Out Loud here on the SaltWire Network. And Sunil Sarwal is joining here the conversation. He's involved in the food marketing world. He's invested in that. And Sunil, it's so nice to see you. Thank you very much for speaking with me.
Thank you, Sheldon.
So you went to NASCAD and you're now working in the food industry. What is it that you do? What might people recognize of the work that you've done?
So I work in food branding and design. So if a company is introducing a new food product, or they have one that's maybe not performing the way they want it to, and they might turn to me, for instance, to help them to get it to sell better. So what I do is I help them find who their market is, build and craft the story that'll reach their market and get their attention, so that the product will sell better. Sometimes that can be research, it can be naming the product, it can go down to even the technical details on designing the packaging, what their advertising should say, things like that. You'd probably know me from things like Libra. I worked with Upstreet and helped them develop their brand for their non-alcoholic beer, for instance.
Right. And how does someone who grows up in Halifax, the son of someone, a mathematician, and then you end up in this art world, but it's art and science, I would say, the work that you do?
Yeah. So, son of a mathematician. My parents really wanted me to be a doctor, but I wanted a creative job. I'm the sort of person, I'm always doing a crossword puzzle, always sketching. And I went to NASCAD, I studied communication design, and then I moved to Montreal because back then there weren't a lot of jobs here. And I worked in various agencies and companies as a designer. I ended up running my own design agency in Montreal for about 10 years. And then I recently moved back to Halifax, my hometown, to take care of family. So I've been working in food branding here ever since.
We've seen this incredible rise in inflation. That is the dominant story, that most people these days are finding it tough to pay for the groceries that they need to survive. So all of this to kind of circle back to a few weeks ago, there was the CEOs from the grocery companies who were called before a committee hearing in Ottawa, and I did see some of your commentary on social media, and I'm curious what you're seeing as someone who's involved in that world, and this narrative that it's either greedflation or for some reason that people are of the mind that, well, there's no way that people are not taking advantage of us right now. What does Sunil say about that situation?
Yeah, I think that Canadian families are understandably angry. Everything is getting more expensive. We're seeing interest rates going up, rent, the gas, the electricity, but food is the one that really sticks out to us because we can't put off buying food for another year the way we might with a car or a new phone. We're buying it often, so it's easy to compare. When the price of something we buy regularly, like every month, jumps up a few dollars every time we go to the store, we notice it. And so we get angry about the food. And at the same time, food inflation is quite a bit higher than regular inflation. In Nova Scotia, the regular inflation rate, I think, is around 6.5%. Food inflation, like you said, though, Sheldon, is in double digits. We're around 10% right now, and it might be even higher for 2023. So people are really, really noticing that.
And as someone who designs packaging to help sell a product, and here we had the conversation about no-name products being frozen, the prices being frozen for a while. What do you know about that industry? What is in a no-name product that's in a non or a branded product? How is it different?
I just want to say briefly for the price freeze, as a lot of other people, insiders have commented, I think that was a bit of a marketing stunt. There's generally a price freeze every year during that period where producers are not allowed to raise their prices. So that same price freeze would have happened last year, the year before that. It just isn't advertised. So there's nothing really special about that happening again this year. What's unusual is that the prices of other goods are still going up during this period, which doesn't normally happen. That's what's exceptional. So it's not, hey, we're freezing the prices on these couple goods. The real story is, hey, unusually this year, we're allowing the prices on all those other goods to keep increasing, which they normally wouldn't do during this period. So I think what's happened is that, with COVID happened, it kind of set expectations in the public for increases in cost and delays, and the Canadian public, we kind of came together and said, look, this is the way it's going to be. We're just going to deal with it, and it's a temporary thing. And I think a lot of different industries took notice of that and saw an opportunity. Then when the war in Ukraine started, that affected costs on oil, on fertilizer, on wheat. And then when Saudi Arabia and OPEC cut production, fuel prices went up again. And the oil industry in particular really took advantage of that. They made more profit in 2022 than they have in the history of oil production. And that has started to affect the cost of every single part of a thing that goes into a food product. So a lot of the commentary so far has just been about the end, the price on the shelf and the margin that the grocery store is making on that. But where I'm coming from, where I'm working with the people who actually make the food product, I get to see sometimes the numbers of how this breaks down and what goes into it. So for instance, if somebody is making, say, a cereal, there's their ingredients, the wheat that goes into it, that's gone up. There's the packaging. Now, producing the packaging, that cost has gone up. When you're big enough to go in a grocery store, you have somebody to assemble all of the food into the bag into the box, your co-packer. Their costs, of course, have gone up because electricity and fuel costs have gone up. Transportation, that's gone up. And those costs are getting passed on. And each time it gets passed on, there's a little bit of padding being added in because people have seen these producers have seen, well, yeah, you know what, the market's okay for it. I'm going to add a few percent here, a few percent there. But that's cumulative at every step of the way. The food producer usually doesn't sell directly to the grocery store. They'll sell to a distributor. And that's something that's being overlooked, I think, in a lot of the conversations I'm hearing. A distributor might add as much as 30 to 50% to the cost of a product before it gets to the grocery store. So there's another increase. And when your cost goes up a few percent at each step, and then they're adding 30%, that gets magnified. Then your grocery store will add their margin as well. The famous 4% that they're adding. 4% is an average figure, though. It depends on the category. In some categories, it can be as high as 50%. In other categories, they'll take a loss to draw people into the store. So it might average out to 4%, but what I've seen in my career is expect about 30 to 50% of the increase. So if we were to break that down, Sheldon, into actual numbers, without getting too technical, if a few years ago I had a product that cost about $1, my distributor put a 50% markup, so it's $1.50. It gets to the grocery store and they add a 50% markup, another 75 cents. I'm looking at $2.25 by the time it hits the shelf. Now imagine today, my same product, instead of $1, is costing me $1.50 because of all of these increases in fuel, etc. My distributor is still going to add a 50% increase. So now I'm at $2.25 before I've even gotten to the store. That used to be the shelf price. Now my grocery store, they say, hey, our margins haven't changed. So, okay, they're going to add another 50%, just like they did before, but 50% on $2.25 adds up to $3.40. So, yeah, their margin hasn't changed, but they were charging $2.25. They're now charging $3.38. It's a $1.13 increase. It's a 66% increase in profit. So this is how two things are true at once. On one hand, their margins haven't increased. On the other hand, we can see they are making record profits on the backs of Canadian families.
And you're right. That is not an easy explanation for someone to digest when you can hear a narrative echoing that it's simply greed. When it's the end result of compound interest, and it's obviously the increases in the costs overall. To go back to the question of the product in the container, does it matter whether it has a yellow label or if it has a department store or a grocery store brand on it? Is it the same product? Is it a lesser product? Is that something you have any knowledge about?
Yeah, well, one of the big costs for a producer is the marketing. And so a no-name brand, they don't have to do that marketing. You're coming into the store anyway. So they are saving an enormous amount of money right there. And that's how they can be cheaper. They don't have to do a lot of the R&D, a lot of the market research ahead of time, those sorts of sunk costs that come in when a product's being developed, because they're just going to copy their most successful brand name competitor. So that allows them to be cheaper as well. So then they don't have the same distribution issues because the distribution is coming through the grocery store itself. So that cuts their cost. Also, grocery stores charge manufacturers a lot of fees. I think we're starting to hear about that a lot more. There's an enormous amount of fees that go into the thing. They're not charging the no-name brands, their own brands, those kinds of fees as well. So all of those little things add up to a huge amount. So the cost of the actual package, the cost of the ingredients might stay the same. All the other costs are either gone or radically reduced. And that's how, for instance, at Loblaws today at Superstore, a no-name orange juice, 1 liter, can sell for $2.99, whereas the brand name orange juice in the same shelf is selling for $7.99.
That's a huge difference. Is someone in that field, in that world, and people are struggling to pay the grocery bill, what is your advice? How do you guide folks? Or do you have any advice about how folks can become a little less anxious about the price of the grocery stores right now?
I mean, I think that sort of anxiety is normal and natural. I think it's a perfectly reasonable reaction to what we're seeing happening to Canadian families these days. The only advice I have to give is the things that everybody else is saying. Price shop if possible. Go to the smaller retailers. It really makes a difference now which store you go to for which products. Go back to coupon shopping the way that our parents did. Really make those sorts of choices. But I think most people are going to hear me saying this and they're going to say, look, I'm already doing that. I'm already cutting back. I've heard from people who say they're cutting back on the meals that they themselves are eating so that their kids have full bellies. It's past the point where a guy like me could have any helpful or useful advice, and we've gotten into more of something needs to be done sort of situation.
And what would that remedy look like? What needs to be done in your opinion, Sunil?
I think a lot of the problems are coming from monopolies in a lot of places, and the government needs to address that. Anytime we have monopolies either on the end or at the beginning of this food development process, we see abuses and we see the consumer getting the short end of the stick. And I think the government needs to have the courage to address that with strict regulation.
And with more competition, I suspect that manufacturers want to be even more appealing to their customer. It might mean more work for you right now.
It might, yeah.
Is there anything else about your position, your job, your thoughts that you wanted to share with us before we wrap this up?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So I saw the parliamentary questions that were being asked, and I have to say I was just tremendously disappointed as an insider in this industry. You could see that they really hadn't taken the time to speak to people who have that sort of inside knowledge. And so you had Jagmeet Singh, looking for his soundbite, looking to make himself look good, but asking very, very simple questions. And what came out of that whole thing was that the grocery stores really got to push their narrative, which is it's all about input costs. Our margins haven't changed. We're not adding to inflation. Whereas the truth is that if somebody had just asked, okay, your margins haven't changed since last year, but have they changed since before the pandemic? I think we would have got a much more meaningful answer. Jim Stanford, the economist at Progressive Economic Forum, pointed out that in 2019, their margins soared, almost doubled, in fact, and nobody asked that kind of question. There weren't people that had that sort of industry inside knowledge to really question the CEOs the way they needed to. And I was very disappointed to hear that, because there are a lot of people like me, a lot of people with this sort of inside knowledge that they could have asked. And we shouldn't have been asking, are the food CEOs causing inflation? What we should have been asking is, are they passing it on unfairly, and are they profiting from it unfairly? And I think that would have been a far more useful question to ask for Canadian families during this crisis.
And it's obvious that if you are human and you eat every day, food inflation is likely to catch your attention more so than the price of fuel, which we already alluded to. Oil companies, they had a pretty good 2022.
Yeah.
Fascinating topic, and I really do appreciate having your perspective. And Sunil, I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sheldon.